So, do I have a motion to adjourn the Board of Aldermen's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Meeting's adjourned. Good night. Odd to me. We come out here, it's 6 o'clock, and the first thing I say, we're adjourning the meeting, right? We're adjourning the special meeting that we just had, and then now we're gonna start our, but if I was sitting in the audience and they came out and said, okay, meeting's adjourned. So, saying that, what are we doing here? I'm going to call this meeting to order. If you would, follow along with the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation from Alderman Howden. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bow your heads with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening and the ability to come together and gather as community leaders and citizens alike. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have the governor come down and visit us this morning. It's always tremendous when we get state leaders get to come down to our area and show them our values and everything that we're planning to show off Branson's patriotism and values to the world. On that note, America's going to be having a very special birthday coming up next year. And as we continue to have these discussions, we just thank you so much for the opportunity that we live in this incredible country that you've blessed. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Marshall. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Lucas? Denham? Cooper? Here. Milton?
Here.
Howden?
Here.
LeBlanc? Schultz?
Here.
Thank you. Your Honor, you have a quorum. Apologies.
Thank you. We will start off tonight with a special recognition. The City of Branson is honored to present Mona Miller with a certificate of appreciation on behalf of the town of Irwin, Tennessee. Mayor Glenn White would like to extend his heartfelt gratitude for Mona's incredible efforts in bringing Ozark Mountain Christmas to the Irwin community during a pivotal time of healing. In the aftermath of the devastation caused by Hurricane Helene, Mona's efforts brought light and hope to our town when it was most needed. Thank you, Mona, for sharing your generosity and vision with the town of Irwin and making a meaningful difference in their lives. Mona, would you meet me down here? Thank you. Mona, the mayor of Irwin called me up on the phone and shared with me all that you did for their community. He said it was very heartfelt. The whole community was touched by your efforts. I wanted to give you this letter that he wrote, and he has a certificate of appreciation. It says, "This certificate is proudly presented to Mona Miller in appreciation for the Ozark Mountain Christmas event, bringing warmth and joy to the heart of Irwin, Tennessee." Signed and sealed by the mayor. Can you share a few words?
I accept this on the behalf of an entire crew, because I didn't do it alone. It took truck drivers, it took people, it even took inmates to help put up trees. And I want you to know tonight, I heard about this last week, So I was able to notify people from around the world, and I want to say thank you to all of you from England, from Australia, from the Philippines, from Tennessee, from North Carolina, all those people, Ohio, Mississippi, Texas, because they all donated to pay for the gas and the fuel and all the trees and decorations, and for God's sakes, all that food that we was able to feed those people a hot meal. So I accept this graciously from the mayor of Irwin and the city of Branson, because it's not for me, it's for all of those who came together to make it happen. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, as you make your way up here, Irwin, Tennessee is one of the most beautiful places. It's Unicoi County, right off the Appalachian Trail. It's a place that God has blessed, absolutely, and Mona, you were certainly another one of those blessings. Thank you so much for what you did.
So, Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers tonight?
Yes, sir. We have 3 speakers.
Okay, so please note, this will be there will be a 5-minute limit on all items listed on the agenda. This is the public comment section of the Board of Aldermen meeting. At this time, the board will hear the citizens who have signed up in the order they are listed. Please note, the clerk will let speakers know when they have 30 seconds left, and a notification will sound when their time is up. We ask that speakers wrap up their comments upon hearing the 30-second warning. If a speaker would like a board member to bring an item down from the consent agenda for additional discussion, please note this request during your comments. Please come to the freestanding microphone to address the board. Madam Clerk, who do you have?
Our first speaker is Beth Schultz, speaking on the red, the blue, and the golden rule. He'll do it.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Alderman, Mr. Mayor, Kathy. I had the distinct honor and pleasure in the last 2 weeks to attend 2 city events, one with Chief Martin and the fire department, and one with Chief Schmidt and the police department, the red and the blue. But I want to talk about the golden rule. We all know it. As do unto others, as you want them to do to you, or simply treat others the same way you want to be treated. That actually came from 5 simple words from the Bible. Love your neighbor as yourself. These 2 leaders, and I see that it's the month for leadership, exemplify this golden rule. I've watched this in all the years that I've lived here, but in these last 2 weeks, I saw it even more so with their departments. They had the golden rule of sharing and respect back and forth with the people within their departments. The one hand, I had the honor of sitting with a battalion chief and 4 honor guard. They just exuded pride in what they did at the department, the uniform that they wore, and their leadership and the people around them. It was truly a blessing to hear this from them. On the same token, I heard it from the police side of things at that event. There was actually a lieutenant and a sergeant that started something new that showed that they have the same love and respect for the entire family and setting a higher standard for all of them. And I was truly amazed by that. And any leader should be that way. They should have accolades for the people who do things well. And it's great to hear, oh, you did a wonderful job and good for you and I love this and that. But is it just lip service, or is it the way that they live? If you get a chance to ever see these 2 outside of their workplace, it's not just at the workplace. They do it in their everyday lives. They actually live this golden rule. And it has a trickle-down effect because of, as I mentioned, both at the fire and at the police, people under them were also showing the love and respect back up to their chiefs and to their families. I have lived in 8 communities in my life, and there's only been one other community in which I knew members of both the fire department and the police department. But this is the only community in Branson that I felt compelled to come public and say, I have so much love and admiration for these 2 men and for the men and women that work for them, that have our back every single day. And I just wanted you to know that kind of golden rule mentality, I think we all need to emulate. And I want you to know I have the utmost respect for those 2 gentlemen and their departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Our next speaker is Gary Groman, speaking on Is This Okay?
I think we can agree that the 4% city tourism tax on show tickets and attractions is a vital stream of revenue for the city. The co-op marketing program the city and TCD had with the shows and attractions made sense. Every dollar a show or attraction put into the program was matched with the co-op marketing program. A show or attraction puts in $100 for marketing, and the co-op puts in $100 for a total marketing pot of $200. Further, it is my understanding that the marketing was to be done under a program approved and supervised by the marketing entity contracted by the TCED to do the marketing for the district. I'm told that the TCD has withdrawn its $300,000 from the program, leaving only the city's share for use by our theaters and attractions. Given the importance of our shows and attractions and the 4% city tourism tax on the tickets, I would ask you to consult with our TCED representatives as to the rationale for voting and approving the withdrawal of the TCED from this program and take whatever action you deem appropriate. To me, the withdrawal makes no sense at all. On another note, recently I was in Springfield 2 weeks ago, and a confidential source that I trust told me that one of the city's representatives to the TCED board, identifying themselves as a board member, tried to influence a subcontractor doing work for the marketing agency that TCED has contracted to do its marketing for them with. They wanted to put more emphasis on shows. I would ask you to look into this situation to determine if this is the kind of activity it wants its TCED representatives to be involved in and take appropriate action. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, this very night, before a rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. I have a feeling that there is a possibility that this very night, before this meeting is over, that one or more of you will seek to deny the requirements of the Branson Municipal Code. I could be wrong, it's just a feeling."
Thank you, Gary. Madam Clerk?
Our final speaker is Heather Herman, speaking on America's 250 celebration.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, real quick.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I invited Heather tonight to come and speak about the America's 250 celebration, which I think is just a tremendous initiative. And just want to kind of throw it out there that there may be some questions and stuff, so the 5 minutes might not allot for the entire time if there are some questions from the board. So.
Well, Marshall, I believe that this topic is so important. I believe we ought to have put Heather on the agenda item for our next meeting. Give her more than the 5 minutes so she can share, and then we can have some open dialogue. And the public and the businesses, if they knew Heather was going to be addressing this topic, they might have wanted to attend to give some input or ask some questions.
Yeah. Well, that was my first inclination, but I was kind of advised that this would be an okay thing by our administration. So that was kind of my first inclination, was to put it on the agenda. But I wanted to kind of get the ball rolling, essentially, on that. So.
I really think this should be an agenda item.
Do that too if you want to do an introductory thing where she can give the high points and then come back for a full presentation, if you'd like.
How much time are you looking for, Heather?
I can take as long as you need. I,
If you want to just cover some highlights in the 5 minutes, but what we would ask is at our next board meeting, let's get you on the agenda, because I know introducing this is going to be important, because I know you want to include the public and the schools and the businesses. But I think this is an excellent topic. I just wanted it to be presented properly.
I will gladly take more time, and we would love to be on the agenda so we could give you a full presentation. After being at the state capitol today and talking with Representative Seitz, as well as Daniel Seitz and other elected officials, we are by far the destination in the state of Missouri who's going to be doing the most for the 250th. So it would only make sense that we would be on the agenda and get to showcase some of the incredible things we have outlined. I did bring a one-pager just as a brief synopsis, but I'd love it if we could talk in depth and show pictures and concepts and all of that.
Well deserved, this topic is so deserving, right? I mean, this is a big deal.
From a state's perspective, the response that we received today was they can't wait to see what Branson does. And what we heard overwhelmingly was that there was basically going to be one celebration point. It's going to be the Arch on 4th of July. No one else really has much of anything planned. And when we told everyone we met with today what we plan to do and that we would be extending invitations to all of them to come throughout the year of 2026, they all were like, sign me up. What can we do? Where can we go? And the thing that resonated the most was our opportunity to hang as many American flags in one destination as possible to get the Guinness Book of World Records. Because right now, the only place that has that is the nation's capital for hanging the most flags over a capital. So we have a huge chance of getting that. But then also, I want you to think about it, let's paint a street with stars and stripes. Our representatives were, they picture drones and, you know, people stopping and selfie stations, and there's so much potential and opportunity with this celebration that I would agree with you. It deserves some time for sure, and the chance for you all to talk about it, brainstorm, ask questions.
I met with the governor, Keel, this morning, and we talked about many things, and I talked about the celebration, and I told him that Branson intends on going over the top on this, following your leadership. And I said, we're not celebrating it for one day, we'll be celebrating it for the entire year. And then I couldn't help myself, and I asked him if the state could send us $200,000 to go towards the celebration. I said, Branson would make Missouri proud.
I think that's a great ask, and I would add more to that. I would add another 0. We could really do it up.
Okay, so anything else you wanted to share tonight before the presentation?
I don't know how, I think that it does deserve definitely time to talk about it in depth, because we have some really great concepts, not just the logo that we've transcribed into celebratory red, white, and blue, but the location. Our organization happens to own the hillside where the nativity scene is. So when that nativity scene is not there, picture Branson in red, white, and blue, lit up in red, white, and blue that stays there throughout the year. We've come up with pockets of patriotism to put around the community. We look at the giant staircase tower where the convention center parking lot is. That tower is worthy of some stars and stripes painting. But then if we also engage our student community and our teacher community to have murals painted and enlist our students to participate, that automatically gets our parent involvement, our community involvement. The opportunities are endless.
Yeah.
And we've outlined just a general list, but we've also come up with concepts for quotes that are painted around buildings, like land that I love, land of the free, home of the brave, just the word freedom. Let's celebrate the penny. It's going away. We got to paint it someplace so people can take their picture next to it, right? I mean, there's a giant 1,500-pound penny in Lincoln Park in California. It's one of the most photographed places, selfie stations in California. We need our own penny place here in Branson. But we also have the capability in our organization to create a spot on our website, but then also through a program that we use called Bandwango, where we can have a whole patriotism section where people can go around all over and find different pockets of patriotism and enter to win prizes. But it goes beyond that. We've talked to College of the Ozarks already and asked them to come up with a red, white, and blue ice cream in their creamery. We've asked them to come up with a stained glass piece that can be sold. So it really has the opportunity to unite this entire destination and make it truly the most patriotic place in America. And the thing that I would like to mark is, with all the destinations I've talked to across the country and what their plans are, they're starting from scratch because they don't already have patriotism in their communities like we do. We are already a step ahead because Branson is already patriotic. So we've just got to take it to that next level.
I am so excited. And thank you. You mentioned this to me when we first heard President Trump say we're going to be celebrating our 250th. So you've been working on this since then, and getting a year's head start, right, is really putting us in a position to do it right.
Absolutely. And there's opportunity to start early with some of the things. We've already been talking with some of our business partners around Branson, and the tracks with the giant Ferris wheel, they're already looking at starting to decorate in red, white, and blue this year so that they can be ahead of that. So why not move forward? We already know that the president is already starting the celebration this summer, so we can already be a part of that too. When we think about the Blue Angels, for example, that's a great place for us to showcase what we're going to be doing in 2026 and start launching some of these things and getting people excited. And we've had nothing but positive reviews from people just saying, yes, we want to be a part of this. What can we do to participate? So we know it's going to be huge. Thus another zero on that ask.
Got it.
Of the governor.
So that's 2 more zeros?
Maybe. I mean, can you imagine? We could have a beacon. You could see it from outer space, red, white, and blue.
And for you all to know that it has not been publicly announced yet. However, the Thunderbirds have chosen Branson in 2026 to perform at the Branson Airport. And I have the dates. I believe they're September 4th and 5th. So I think you may want to touch on that also, who knows?
It's that, and it's so much more. We have proposed having a parade on Memorial Day, a parade on 4th of July, a parade on Labor Day. Like, let's make this a place for celebration all year long. We also know that Silver Dollar City will have red, white, and blue patriotic themes from the spring through the fall. So we've got that area cornered over there. We've already talked to Thunder Ridge and asked them, how big can they go for the 4th of July next year in 2026? And they have their thinking caps on. I have another meeting with them tomorrow about what direction they can take this. And I've said, think big. Think the biggest fireworks show in all of Missouri, if not the Midwest. So big that we make the arch look like sparklers. Let's really do this for Missouri. And their minds are like, yes, we've got to take it to the next level. We've got to do this. So big that we have viewing parties all around Branson because no one else can fit out at Thunder Ridge. Let's really do this. And the nice thing about it is it's not a huge ask of our business community to say, wear red, white, and blue. Have a drink that's themed red, white, and blue. Have a special that's red, white, and blue. It's not a huge financial commitment that we're asking of business partners to do this, but we already have stars and stripes in what we do, right? So it's just taking it where it's more recognizable, it's more definable, it's more clear, and it's something that we can talk about and share. I will say that I had an interview with the National Geographic last week, a freelance reporter who's writing a story about what cities are doing across the country. And I pitched her what we're doing in Branson. And she called me and she said, how confident are you that these things are going to happen? And I said, 100% confident. I can say it with all certainty that our elected officials, our state representatives, we have the backing of our community to do this. And she said, you're the only destination I've talked to that has said with certainty that things will happen. I'm like, you can put it in print, baby. We're doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. That's going to be exciting. So next is the consent agenda. Are there any items that any member of the board would like to have moved down from consent agenda to ask additional questions or comments? Madam Clerk, would you please read the items on the consent agenda?
Your Honor, the items on the consent agenda are as follows. Approval of the Board of Aldermen minutes for February 11th, 2025 special meeting and February 11th, 2025 regular meeting. Acknowledge receipt of the Planning Commission minutes for the January 7th, 2025 regular meeting. Acknowledgement of disbursements from January 22nd, 2025 through February 14th, 2025. And final reading of Bill Number 6522, an ordinance amending Section 2-201 of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to removal of members of boards, commissions, committees, and councils. Your Honor, that concludes the reading of the consent agenda.
Do I have a motion approving all items on the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion is second. Madam Clerk, would you take a roll call vote?
Lucas? Denham? Cooper?
Yes.
Howden?
Yes.
LeBlanc? Schultz?
Yes.
The result of the vote is 4-0. Motion carries. Your Honor, the next item is a presentation to the Board of Aldermen regarding emergency operations planning for flooding incidents affecting the city of Branson downstream from Table Rock Dam.
We'll begin with the report from Ted Martin.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. I'd like to give a brief presentation on some planning around Table Rock Dam. I'm going to read this so I can stay on point and on time and get you out of here within the next 2 hours of the presentation. Administrator. March 3 through 7 is Severe Weather Preparedness Week. This is a great time to be talking about the work that we do with the National Weather Service and our emergency management partners to promote having a plan, lightning safety, tornadoes, wind, hail, and flooding, which we've seen here in the Branson area. Tonight I'll focus on the topic of flooding specifically related to our city's emergency planning and framework for flooding downstream from Table Rock Dam. You know what our mission statement is, and part of it is the emergency management side of being prepared. And you know that the history of Table Rock Lake and Lake Taneycomo are a foundation of our community for a lot of the sports and activities and family fun. That's part of our mission that you all have been sharing across our community as we use that recreation as part of White River system. Table Rock Dam is just one resource to manage flooding, the key word, to manage flooding downstream within that White River Lake system. So let's take a very high level look as we plan and respond for flooding events along the White River system, specifically Lake Taneycomo. On the screen, you'll see some of the 4 declared disasters we had through FEMA, some of the higher levels of flooding that we had here over the years, the highest being in 2015 when we were just about 73,000 cubic feet of water per second here. Controlled or managed flooding events have occurred along Lake Taneycomo with direct impacts to our city. This includes our infrastructure such as roads, sewer lift stations, the treatment plant, and the water intake system for our city. City facilities, including our city campground and parks, our residential neighborhoods, and commercial businesses have been affected along Lake Taneycomo. Without floodwater management from the dams, our area would have commonly seen floodwaters above 250,000 cubic feet of water per second. So the dams do what they're supposed to do appropriately here downstream. To put this in perspective, in 2015, Table Rock Dam was passing the 72,975 cubic feet of water per second. In perspective, that's over 500,000 gallons of water per second coming through the gates on that structure. You see that when you look at emergency management, it's not just the fire department, but it's everybody. When you look at fire and police that do the public safety, but every department has a hand in emergency management, and we keep making progress every day. We're not perfect, and we just make progress each day with our systems. Examples, we have a program coming forward called Silver Jackets from the Corps of Engineers that are going to help us start working on a evacuation plan for areas downstream from Table Rock Dam. We had a first meeting about 2 weeks ago. The Silver Jackets hasn't been released yet, but we did some pre-work, and I will share with you that Curtis and GIS, once again, became the rock star working with our law enforcement and MoDOT and our Public Works Department. We're able to use his data that we've given him from the prior floods and from the inundation mapping that we have from the Corps of Engineers and his work that he's done to tell exactly with what number that we want to give him what roads are impacted, what infrastructure is impacted, what lift stations are impacted, so we can go through that entire system. We are a National Weather Service storm-ready community. That means we have multiple points of warning, multiple ways of getting the word out to the public, that we do public education, that we have a Branson alert system set up to warn people along the Lake Taneycomo area, for example. the RRAP system, which is a federal program that helped us look at the infrastructure of the dam and the threats and hazards of that was completed a couple of years ago. But yet we're still on that unpredictable side of the stormwater with heavy rainfalls that we've seen in past years. And looking at the screen here some, but Public Works maintaining our storm water systems, planning, maintaining detention basins required for construction and the National Floodplain Program standards, parks, emergency plans, for example, with Cindy in the campground, especially in those areas, and the fire department swift water teams. There are things that we've done that have prepared or responded to different incidents, but there's one more big kind of elephant in the room that we'll talk about here in just a second as we get through, and that's the what if. The concern that was brought to us to look at was what if, and I remember I want to speak very high level right now in a public forum and not dive into the weeds. So as you think about this a little bit, please understand where I'm headed with that. The catastrophic failure of the dam or terrorism or cybersecurity are mostly classified information in partnership with the Corps of Engineers and the emergency management partners here in the county. Cybersecurity, please know that Table Rock Dam gate specific are not controlled through internet or computer access in Little Rock. It takes two actions that are human driven to move the gates. Structural integrity, the Corps of Engineers constantly monitors and measures for movement in the structure. In fact, they say it continuously hardens, even from the 1950s when the structure was built, that concrete is still hardening, but they have measurement tools in the structure that they're watching daily with their team. And then emergency planning continues with each year with the stakeholders, including these topics and more. And I think we kind of caught their attention when we brought this back from our leadership team at the city, that this will be a point of work that we do this spring when they have their stakeholder meeting out at the Project Management Center by the dam. So that's coming up, and that includes things like they're constantly monitoring with security cameras, the park rangers, the federal folks that are on that structure. And our communications and working relationship has significantly improved over the years with the Corps of Engineers. When I first started, it was not that good. And we shared with them that within the plan, adopted by Congress, they can't just change it. It is a congressional adopted plan, that they can only respond to what has hit the basin in Beaver, Bull Shoals, Table Rock. They can only respond to what physically hits the basin. We take it from a different angle and do predictions based on our partnership with the Weather Service. So for example, if they tell us our gates are going to open at 40,000 cubic feet of water per second, we will automatically do our planning at 25 to 50% higher. And what we told the Corps of Engineers as we built this relationship is we prefer to work in the daylight for flooding. So especially in Cindy's world with the campground, especially evacuating our city parks. And that has paid off where we've done most of our work typically in the daylight ahead of the Corps by that percentage of amount. So the final screen is just an area that we can look at identified gaps. And when I say identified gaps, I'm a firm believer in emergency management, and everything we do in all our city departments is continuous improvement of services. That used to be one of our city values, and we are committed to that. So we do the NIMS training and trying to work in everybody's schedules to do some disaster related, whether it be a tabletop exercise or a functional exercise. We've done it with the airport, we've done it with the Corps of Engineers, we've done it with different programs here in town. We are ready to start firing up the CERT program again. We continue to improve the external communications. Chad just put in a new Starlink system in the EOC, for example. All of the directors' phones now working down into staff have upgraded cell phones for satellite connectivity for texting. So I will share with you, the administrator has been pushing this charge to focus in this area. And one thing that you did was funded the emergency management position with Josh coming on board, wave Josh. Everybody loves to see Josh. That has been a huge blessing this year to work on some of those things that we just had not had the time to commit to. So I'm very thankful for that. And then of course, Silver Jackets will be coming up as well. So those are just a quick highlight look at where we have been with the Table Rock Dam, what we've done. I think we've built a very solid relationship with the Corps of Engineers. very thankful for. If you look at the Branson Landing, they have their required 404 permit, immersive planning. Cindy has her planning. I already mentioned that Michael's crew, for example, has an updated system for cleaning storm drains. We've mitigated risk at our Compton facility with the new flood wall. So there's always things in motion that we've done to improve, to maintain our systems and services, our infrastructure within that controlled flooding downstream from Table Rock Dam. So with that, I'd open any questions. Be perfect.
Any questions from the board? Glenn?
Yeah, thanks, Chief Martin. My question is related to the comment that Branson Landing has a plan. We have about 100+ residences on Branson Landing, and I've been asked repeatedly by our residences, what is the plan? And so I would appreciate it if maybe somebody from your staff would meet with our board of directors to enumerate what the plan should be, what we should be working on as residents, and what the expectations would be in the course of some flooding event. And I think we probably have the lowest altitude property along the lakefront.
Arm floaties would be the first thing to purchase, but to your point, I think when you talk about the planning, we're at the citizen level, and the plan I spoke of is their action plan for shutting down air handlers, the propane gas, the roadways, the elevators. They have to do that by elevation, and now we're ready to start work on the evacuation planning by zones, by districts, by wards. So that's where we'll start using Curtis and the Corps of Engineers and the Silver Jackets along the entire area, including Branson Landing residents, to work on that. We came very close with your neighborhood in 15. We were threatened with extremely high flows when they stopped it at that 73,000, but we evacuated that whole neighborhood within a matter of a couple of hours. And the nice thing is the trust was present, the messaging through the city was present, and we had zero complaints because the water did not come in beyond your roadways at that point. So very thankful for those partnerships. But to your point, I wrote that down to follow up on.
Because I seem to recall our garage had like 6 feet of water in it, and elevators were inoperable and things like that. And we've got old enough residents in there that it's not just going to be, hey, everybody head for the steps.
Yes.
Any other aldermen have any questions, comments? Anybody from the audience? Hearing none, thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate that.
Your Honor, this is the first reading of Bill Number 6523, an ordinance amending the Branson Municipal Code for exceptions to the alarm system and sprinkler system requirements in Chapter 42, Fire Prevention and Protection regarding Section 42-55, subsections 903 and 907 pertaining to the International Fire Code.
You've heard the first reading of Bill Number 6523. Do I have a motion approving this bill? We have a motion and a second, and we'll get a report from Ted.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Staff was directed to draft language to amend the International Fire Code, the International Building Code regarding the installation of fire sprinklers and fire alarms in R1 use group. Remember that R use groups address all forms of residential occupancies except single-family residences and two-family units like duplexes, so all of our commercial residential properties. R1 specifically addresses occupancies containing sleeping areas where the occupants are primarily transient in nature, staying less than 30 days. This includes our hotels, motels, cabins, short-term rentals, for example, that are used for commercial business purposes. This proposed amendment for the board to consider reduces the requirements of the adopted international codes. This proposed amendment eliminates fire sprinklers and fire alarms in R1 occupancies that are standalone, equal to or less than 1,200 square feet with a maximum occupant load of 6 people.
Any questions, comments from the board? Questions from the audience? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Your Honor, the next item is the public hearing and first reading of Bill Number 6524, an ordinance amending Chapter 94, Table 94-64-1, temporary uses in Section 94-64D3 of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to farmers markets.
We'll now open a public hearing and begin with a staff report from Holly Dodge.
Good evening. I'm happy to present to you recommended changes that have been presented to the Planning Commission, which was unanimously approved, changing a few aspects of the permit process for farmers market. The reason we have a farmers market presentation is because if they don't have a farmers market permit, then they have to get an event permit. Farmers market permit allows 52 occurrences per year. Event permits are less. So we treat these differently, and what we are looking at for changes here, instead of having a max number of vendors and max number of agricultural versus non-agricultural vendors, we're looking at a ratio of more agricultural vendors than non-agricultural vendors. There, I said that without tripping my tongue up. We also noticed that in looking at this and receiving feedback from our current farmers market vendor is that it was not allowed in ag. So you could not have a farmers market in the agricultural district, and we kind of thought that should be changed as well. So we made that change. I do believe there may be some requested amendments, but that is what we are asking the board for tonight.
You trying to tell us you don't think ag should go in ag? Any questions or comments from the board? Marshall?
Mr. Mayor? Holly, could we pull up the language real quick?
Chad? Second page. Coming? Right, right there. And I think what you are wanting to direct our attention to is sub 3, sub C, which looks like it's maybe on line 78 or 79.
Yeah, and we talked about this at the briefing this morning, so I appreciate you kind of preparing this as a possible amendment that I'd like to run by my fellow aldermen here. Essentially, I'm proposing that we strike the language that says not occupy an area larger than 20,000 square feet. You know, I think these farmers markets, insofar as they meet certain parameters, can be a really good deal for our community. And if we got a really big one, I don't necessarily see a reason to limit it to 20,000 square feet. And then kind of digging into why that might have been the case in the past, you didn't want to encroach on somebody else's business, or there's a lot of different reasons why that might have been the case. But I think that a huge farmers market coming into our town could only be good for this community.
I feel like you may have caught the heather bug. Bigger, 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 add a 0.
Marshall, well, if I'm reading this right, isn't that language already?
That language is what he is proposing for an amendment in C. We did not have any changes in what is presented to you, so he is checking to see if there's support for him to move for an amendment as reflected in C.
So what's stricken out, what's highlighted now, Marshall, you're asking to make that amendment?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I see.
Yes, sir.
I'll
And
second that.
I'd like to make that motion now.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
So we're just still in the public hearing. We don't have it on the floor yet as even just
We're
an
just
item.
chit-chatting.
So we're not
For
quite
public
there yet.
hearing.
Okay, yeah, I think bigger the better, right? So was there anything else you were? So are there any other changes in this?
So the changes you see are in the table. Do you see where we have the T, farmer's market, T, A only, so you can get a temporary use permit in ag only. So that's one of the changes we're making. We're making the change in A, striking out the 25 ag vendor max and 5 non-ag vendor max and making it a ratio. Those are the changes we proposed and discussed in front of the Planning Commission.
Holly, what is the ratio?
It's a majority. So it's a simple
51%.
majority. If the board has a desire for something more, we had quite a robust discussion about that amongst staff, and we just felt like it was easier to do a simple majority. It has become such an ingrained portion of farmers markets that while you are filling in those gaps dependent on the seasonal and the production, you need some reasons for people to be there. And food trucks, they're great.
Any questions or comments from the board on this?
I'd like to comment. I think that's, Marcia's idea is great, simply because, again, it kind of fosters that spirit of entrepreneurism in the community and just really kind of, continuing to take the handcuffs off of, people who want to do business in Branson and just making it, easier from an operational standpoint, but even, when you talk about growth of things and, being able to expand the farmer's market beyond 20,000 square feet, becomes a huge asset because, in addition to just selling their crafts, they attract people from other communities to come here. So, great suggestion, Marshall.
Glenn?
Holly, and just so I understand, the agricultural vendors, the state statutes essentially make these events so that they do not have to charge sales tax for what we would generally describe as agricultural products, but the non-agricultural vendors would most likely have to collect sales tax and have a Branson business permit for that. Is that correct?
Those requirements would be in another chapter, and yes, generally, with an asterisk, because it's an attorney who's talking, it should be required.
Anybody else? Any members in the audience have any questions or comments? So I will now close the public hearing. You've heard the first reading of Bill number 6524. Do I have a motion approving this bill?
So move.
We have motion and a second. Any members of the board wishing to speak regarding this matter?
Now, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I would like to make that motion in subsection C there, striking the language, not occupy an area larger than 20,000 square feet, and shall.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the amendment.
And just to ensure that the record is clear, you're asking to also strike maximum area as reflected in the written language and above you. Me.
And change the title.
So did you want that as one amendment?
Yes.
You get that, Hill?
Yes, sir.
Any questions or comments from the board on these amendments? There's two. Well, there's one amendment, but there's two in the one. Oh, Ralph. So let's vote in favor of the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. So now we will vote on the ordinance as amended. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Your Honor, the next item is the public hearing and first reading of Bill number 6525, an ordinance amending section 94-88C of the Branson Municipal Code pertaining to lighting for parking lots.
You have heard the first reading of Bill number 6526. Do I have a motion approving this bill?
So moved.
Second.
We have motion and a second. We'll get a staff report from Holly.
So, yeah, this is a public hearing for this one as well.
I'm so sorry. So I am now opening up a public hearing, and then we'll get a report from Holly.
This has also been presented to the Planning Commission and was approved unanimously. It is minor tweaks to the parking lot lighting for the considerations in planning. The amendments include cleaning up the language, removing any unnecessary wording, minimizing illumination on all adjoining properties. It previously only required minimization of illumination on only residential properties. And so this was a good neighbor provision. It also required consideration of regulation of lighting on landscape and vegetation, and we're removing that as well. So it's part of the red tape initiative. It's part of the balancing of considerations. Many of the considerations for a parking lot in choosing lighting is dictated by the property owner's insurance company.
And this was unanimously approved through P&Z.
Yes, it was.
Any questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Hearing none, I will now close this public hearing. You've heard the first reading of Bill number 6525. Do I have a motion approving this bill?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any members of the board wishing to comment? Glenn?
Yeah, I shared this with staff, but I guess I'd like to share it with the aldermen as well. Personally, I find the wording of this too vague. This is something that ultimately will fall on the shoulders of the development and may be debated by the planning department as to whether it's sufficient. And so when I look at things like glare, the word glare, to me that's a bit like saying, well, our new speed limit ordinances are just don't drive fast. And our new building code ordinances, build them strong and safe. Other than that, we're good. Those are the possibilities, but it kind of leaves you at the point where it's all debatable. And particularly in the case of glare, that is something that quite literally is in the eye of the beholder. And as you age, your perception of glare generally becomes worse, as we see some of our aldermen nodding, until you get cataract surgery, and then you're back to square one again. But it truly is a very subjective thing. And there are standards out there, much like our building code standards and our safety standards and our pool standards and all the other standards that we subscribe to, the ICC type standards. There are ANSI standards out there, American National Standards Institute, for example, BP-20-14, that's very specific about how you design parking lot lighting. So that, and it specifically defines a couple of types of glare in that standard. So we had this discussion in city staff, and I do want to acknowledge that, this does leave latitude. It's a general guidance, but it's also one that could end up being very contentious. It could even get litigated ultimately because it is vague. And so that's my concern. Staff said they looked at ANSI type standards and didn't find them suitable for what they wanted to accomplish here. But I just want to share my concern that I just don't favor these kind of vague regulations.
Holly, legal is okay with this?
Yes, it's a balance. So it's not vague in the sense that it's unconstitutional and lacking in understanding and clarity. It calls for the minimization of illumination. Obviously, we can't screen off, and we're not requiring that. To get to the level of requirements that are clearly scientifically delineated, you would have to have a photometric plan. As soon as we start getting into that, you're talking about additional costs, and this is kind of that balance we talked about with regulations when we went through the land disturbance permits and other aspects. So that was the direction that we went when we presented it to planning, to have it more minimized.
Okay, well, if planning's okay with it and legal's okay with it, any other comments regarding this from the board? Artie?
Mr. Mayor, having had to deal with an issue in our ward up at the north end of Branson Hills Parkway when Social Birdie came in, we had numerous complaints from residents that lived in the condos across the street from there because of the angle of the lights and the amount of reflection they were getting in their windows. They couldn't sleep at night. And so the city, the police department, everybody worked real hard to get those lights down to where they didn't reflect as much. But the type of a light they are, they're an LED light. They're super bright. And so even still driving down Branson Hills Parkway, you do get a glare coming into your windshields coming from the east. And so I do think it's something that's very necessary, and hopefully it will address the issue.
Okay. Any other questions from the alderman? Okay, so this public hearing is now closed. You have heard the first reading of bill number.
We have this one on the floor. That's what you closed the public hearing already. So this one is on the floor.
I wanted to close it twice, just to make sure.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Mayor, are you sure you closed it?
Ready for the vote when you are.
Yeah, we're ready for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign.
No.
Hillary, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Lucas? Cooper?
Yes.
Howden?
Yes.
LeBlanc?
Yes.
Schultz?
No.
So the result of the vote is 4 yes, 1 no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Your Honor, this is the first reading of Bill Number 6526, an ordinance amending throughout Chapter 18, Building and Building Regulations of the Branson Municipal Code to clarify and create a consistent process for the Board of Appeals.
You've heard the first reading of bill number 6526. Do I have a motion approving this bill?
Second.
A motion is second. We'll get a report from Holly.
The Board of Appeals was brought to us because we were looking at what kind of changes we needed to make to Chapter 18 in regards to building permits. In any time that you have a permit, there creates a right, and there needs to be a due process. Our due process was within Chapter 18, different in each adopted international code. So you had a different makeup, a different creation, a different appointment for the Board of Appeals. We currently have a Board of Appeals. They've not met in a couple of years, but that Board of Appeals would not have been sufficient to address an appeal within each of the different codes, because within each of the different codes, it required experts within that field. You can imagine how much of a struggle it would be to maintain those codes, Board of Appeals for the various codes, when in 2 years' time you have not had that challenge. So we have very intentionally looked at making it easy to determine how does one appeal something, how does one address something. So that's why we pulled it out and put it in Chapter 18 instead of going through each of the adopted codes. And then we are taking it out of each of the adopted codes. So it is a clear appeal process that is understandable in front of one board that handles any Board of Appeals cases throughout the various codes except fire.
Okay, any member of the board wishing to speak to this? Glenn?
So Holly, I did ask the question of you earlier about how this relates to the International Fire Code, which wasn't included in this ordinance. Can you comment on that?
Yes. So traditionally, when I'm looking at Chapter 18, I stay within that chapter, but that was an omission that we should have looked more broadly at, and I apologize for that. We do have, since that meeting, I have drafted an amendment that can adopt within Chapter 42. So it'd be changing the title of this, including Chapter 42. Chapter 42 incorporates the fire code, the International Fire Code, which is Appendix A for Board of Appeals, and so we would delete in its entirety Appendix A and reference Chapter 18 and the Board of Appeals process there, so that for any of those building regulations, you would go to the same Board of Appeals, if that is an amendment that is wanted to be considered by the.
So, as I understand it, this really is doing the same amendment that we did to all of our other adopted international standards. We're just adding one more to it, which is to include the appeal process for fire protection. Is that correct?
Correct. Keep going. Go to page 3.
So how, I know this is kind of spread out throughout the document now.
Okay, so if you see the red on 165, we would add in the title of Chapter 42, Article 3, where Fire Prevention Code is adopted. On line 170, it would strike Chapter A, and then line 180 adds in the language of delete in its entirety, Appendix Chapter A, Board of Appeals, see Section 18-7.
Is it, since it's spread out in terms of the motion, can I just simply indicate the changes in red? So moved?
Yes, and you could actually indicate that which is written. So you meet the requirement, which is that it's an embodied document that is in writing for consideration. So all of that red you saw when we scrolled, those would be the additions, and as I discussed previously.
So I'll make that motion.
So Glenn, that's your motion. We have a motion and a second. On the changes, any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Hearing none, let's vote on the amendment only. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Glenn?
Yeah, Holly, then can you go, or Chad, can you scroll to the top of the bill? Down just a little bit, please. A little bit more.
The additional language from 53 on?
No, I'm looking at paragraph B on line 56. I have a practical concern here. What this is saying, if I understand it correctly, is that it is giving a builder, a contractor, an owner 10 days from the time that they're told that there's something that has to be changed or not accepted, perhaps, that they have 10 days to file an appeal with this board. And, you know, just from a strictly practical perspective, knowing how things go on job sites and the multiple layers of contractors, subcontractors, owners, et cetera, I just think 10 days is an unreasonably short period of time for somebody to be able to say, I need to appeal that. Often, after being told that something doesn't meet code, they may even try to work on something to make it meet code, and, the initial determination clock is already ticking. So from my perspective, I'd like to see this changed to something more reasonable, like 45 days to appeal. And so I'll make that motion that we modify that to 45 days.
We have a motion and a second. Any board members have any questions or comments? Ralph?
I guess, would that be 10 working days or 45 working days, or is that actual?
10 days would be 10 actual days, so the 45 would be actual days. The others are pretend days.
Any other, Marshall?
Holly, do you have any comments on the 45 days?
We use the 10 days as a placeholder. 10 days is essentially the nuisance notification. You will see a lot of legislative terms, meaning time periods, and those are usually longer because back in the day, my day, we used the post office. That took a little while. Now, so much of this process, because for Chapter 18, everything goes through Citizen Serve, we send everything out through the software system. So it's through email, so everything is immediate. We just landed in discussion with Supervisor Teed and I on 10, but I don't have, I think you need something, because you don't want to have to go back years in, and we'll talk about that in the next ordinance.
You're right. So my only thought is, because trying to follow our kind of ideology up here and move at the speed of business, right, is in giving the applicant the time, the 45-day time, is there anything within that 45 days that would mess up the speed of business? In other words, you know, could things start happening 30 days in that all of a sudden then they have 40, and on the 44th day, they appeal it and things have already happened. So I'm wondering, I'm trying to give as much leeway as I can to the applicant without sort of messing up our whole speed of business ideology in the first place, basically.
It's a balance. To be quite clear, if there would be a timing issue for that entity, say the applicant was looking for a one-time crane that was coming in that was a specialty and they couldn't move that, they would then go across to the circuit court, ask for an injunction stay. We would agree to allow them to do that, and then we would proceed. So I've seen it in practice. There are ways around it, you know. Attorneys always have a way around.
I see your point. I mean, I think the one thing that stuck with me with Glenn is if you have 10 days and you want to try to come up to code, that doesn't allow you much time to try to get to where you are without going to the appeal. And I see your point too, Marshall, with the 45. I mean, I do agree that longer would be better. Maybe it's 30. I mean, maybe.
Yeah, that's me. I think 10's too little. I don't know if 45's too much.
You know, I think maybe that's a happy compromise. I mean, I'd ask the city administrator her thoughts.
Thank you, Alderman. Actually, I was going to ask Norm if you would come up, please, because I think it'll be helpful to give some examples, Norm, of when this process has been used in the past, what type of circumstances, just to paint a picture, please.
Can I please speak to my attorney first?
Anything you want to share with the rest of the room?
I do.
Historically, I do want to say we have had 0 cases go to the Board of Appeals, so we've had 0 cases for the 2 years I've been here.
So the Board of Appeals, just for the information of those in the room, is to appeal a decision that an aggrieved party feels that the building official has inappropriately applied the code. It is not a variance. If I tell you you have to have a 4-foot fence, and which is a barrier requirement for a swimming pool, and you're like, listen, there's no pool here. I don't have to have 4-foot fence. I can have my 3-foot fence. That's the type of situation that you would bring to a Board of Appeals. Of course, we would, you know, mistakes can happen, and we would, of course, have that discussion with either a design professional or a builder or applicant. And most of the time, those type of things are worked out. And as you can see from the amount of appeals that go before that board, it's very unlikely. But it is not a variance process. So the other thing to keep in mind is while that appeal is pending, it could stop that project. If it was something that was a failed inspection, you know, our department felt that that was an appropriate application of the code. We would, of course, verify that we were on track with that. That could stop the next phase of construction, but the decision to file appeal is the applicant's, the architect, you know, applicant on a permit or a property owner. So even though it may stop a project, that is their call on how they proceed.
So Norm, in the big picture, because this is so rarely used, and it's really, it's all about a disagreement that a permittee has with the permittor, right? Yes. So that's really all this is, and that you've got then 10 days to just say, hey, I vehemently disagree and I want other people to weigh in on this on my behalf. So that's really all it is. It's not it's not a time to cure necessarily, right? It's just a time to hold up your hand and say, I want other people to hear it. Having said that, does it matter to us if it's 10 days or 30 days in the big picture of things as far as our operation?
I have no preference because it does not really impact our department. It's more impact on the applicant, which are the ones that ultimately would decide whether they would choose to do that.
And Norm, just so I understand, the appeal is to the applicant, by the applicant, right? So if, for instance, this is a fairly big project and there was an electrical sub and, something about their work got flagged and we're told, no, you got to change that. They'd have to talk to the GC. The GC would have to talk to the owner. If they couldn't find resolution, they'd have to start running it up the food chain to say, hey, I can't fix this for you. We're about to stop your project because I can't fix it. It's going to have to be the owner, if the owner did the application, that files for the appeal, right? If that's who's on the building permit, it's the owner. And so that these kind of things, when you just think about the ebb and flow within a big project, that's why I think 10 days is unreasonable. And I see no downside to the city for 45 days. It just leaves the applicant more time to get things sorted out. If it stops their job and they want to run a 45-day clock out, that's their call. It doesn't impact the city.
I don't want to call him out, but I see Glenn Robinson back there. I wonder if he's always building stuff. Do you have any input on this, Glenn? Okay. Okay, sir.
Hey, Holly. So the Board of Appeals holds official public hearings, correct? Do they have subpoena power? Like over body cam, for instance? Otherwise, how would you adjudicate? How do they adjudicate?
Right? I mean, it's just a matter of, and maybe it's a gray area code, it's not really clear, and so you need that Board of Appeals to bring common sense in, maybe, where it's not quite clear in the codes. But it's not like an investigatory body. It's just a matter of, was this fairly decided or appropriately decided or not, correct?
And if you look at line 68, it specifically calls out that the procedure shall not require compliance with strict rules of evidence. So it is a formal process in which a person can be heard in regards to their belief that the interpretation is different. It's a checks and balance in understanding and gives everyone that opportunity to be heard.
And I think in the codes, most of the codes, and I'll speak to electrical because that's probably where I spent most of my career messing around with. Almost all the codes have language in them that is vague, right? It's an interpretation, and it's always up to what's called the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, to essentially decide how they're going to interpret that piece of code. And that's usually the areas that can get a contractor in trouble. Is this wire reasonably guarded would be an example in the code. And the inspector could say, that's not a reasonable guard by the way I think about it. And the contractor says, well, this is the way we do it in every other city, and then there starts the process. And somebody's going to have to make the decision, and it would be the Board of Appeals. But my concern specific, though, to the timing of this is just, in a complex project, that can take a fair bit of time before an owner's going to decide, I've got to file an appeal on this, that I don't see a way out of this short of an appeal. And they realize, too, that that's a time-consuming process even to go through the appeal, so they've got to weigh their options, and that's why I suggested 45 days. It seems to me reasonable, it doesn't affect the city.
Okay, so the amendment being discussed is to change the 10 days to 45 days. Does any alderman have an objection to that?
I mean, now that I'm hearing that, I don't know that 30 or 45 might, if the appeal happens, it's the owner doing it, so they're the one holding up the project, right? So I guess we're just talking, does it matter if it's 30 or 45 at that point? Probably not. right? Is that what I'm hearing correctly? Yeah. I do agree, though, 10, more than 10, I agree with that, so.
So let's take a vote on this amendment. All in favor of the 45 days, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Holly?
Now we're back on
Okay, but
as amended twice.
I have a question. On line 48, there's a strike through, and the amendment had to do with all text in red.
That language that you're seeing as strike through on 48 and 49 is striking through what currently exists, because currently all 18.7 says is that, hey, Board of Appeals is adopted throughout each of those adopted international codes.
Okay.
We have so many layers of corrections that, yes.
So, is the board ready to vote on this bill as amended? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Your Honor, this is the first reading of Bill Number 6527, an ordinance amending throughout Chapter 18, Buildings and Building Regulations of the Branson Municipal Code to clarify and create a consistent process for applications and permits.
You've heard first reading of Bill 6527, a motion approving this bill.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Did you get those, Hill?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Begin with a report from Holly.
Good evening. This will be my last one. So this is what started it all. And this was, we found in looking at cleanups within our citizen serve process that we have applications for permits that are over 5 years old. And so we were trying to enforce the language that was currently present in the allowance of an additional 180 days every time you ask for it, and balancing that to what other agencies have used. So we looked around at other agencies. We looked at Republics, and this relatively closely reflects what Republic does. Excuse me, it's also similar to Springfield. Springfield does an annual permit, and so Republic is 180 days, but both of those are pretty similar. We looked at Ozark and Nixa. Ozark and Nixa have adopted all the procedures within the international code as we did with the other one and as we currently sit today. So the changes that you will see are looking at a desire to ensure that there's not a disparity in permit fees, because if I applied for my permit 5 years ago, you probably have changed what those fees are. So I'm still on that 5 years ago. I haven't paid that application. Understand, I have not paid for the application. I just submitted an application. It can sit there with 180-day extensions indefinitely. So that also then causes confusion in regards to utilization and enforcement and which code to use in that time period by the time they finally get the permit, and it requires more reviews, which gives a disparity in cost. It's essentially putting a toe in the door so you don't shut it. And so if you change your zoning like you did in the entertainment district, if a person had an application pending, had not spent any money, they still stay in, and so it allows for speculation, and that's not beneficial for development, for understanding, and for use. Because if your toe is in, but you're not committed to the work, then that can be a detriment to the city as a whole. We also wanted to ensure that it allowed for us in the department to be able to plan and manage workload and have proper inspection oversight, because the time it takes to figure out all the changes and everything, and then you're redoing that inspection, it makes a much more arduous inspection. So what we are proposing is moving all permits and application processes into one place. That also means if I'm getting a permit within Branson, I know I just have to go to 18.8. I don't have to go to 18.8, then go to the International Building Code, then see what was adopted, then get on Google, look up 2018 building code. So long process. We wanted it to be easy to understand and easy to follow, cutting that red tape. It presumes an abandonment of application if there's no action for 180 days. Permits and applications for permits are intended when you know what the project is. It is not a speculation. It provides an extension of application when requested in writing for a justifiable cause. There are things that happen, and that recognizes that and gives that opportunity. The appeal would be if you were denied that extension, you could appeal to the Board of Appeals. So that's where we were looking at that Board of Appeals ordinance that we were just speaking of. In regards to permits, it issues the permit for a year. We currently are 180 days. As I said, Springfield is an annual permit. Republic is 180 days. We felt like a year is appropriate in consultation. And when I say we, I'm talking about Supervisor Teed telling me what to do. And we also wanted an aspect of deeming it abandoned or suspended when there's no progress in a 180-day period without any substantial progress. And we define substantial progress as passing an inspection. It also provides, if you're there at the end, you're at the finish line, and you've been in the marathon of completing a project, you pass an inspection, that gives you a one-time 90-day extension on that permit to finish if you've got some other things to get it done. You don't have to go through an application for an extension. So it's when you're on that tight, that final, we're not going to give you more paperwork. We're going to give you an automatic one time for the life of the permit. It allows the director to extend permits up to 180 days. It also, when requested in writing and with justifiable cause, it also allows a max of 3 180-day extensions. There is clearly going to be large projects that you have that come into play, and so that's why all of these considerations and extensions were in play. This is the request of the Planning Department.
Very nice. Any questions, comments from the board? Glenn?
Just a question, Holly. I like the concept in general, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Just language on this thing. I notice we use the term automatic a fair amount when things are being renewed, like automatic renewals, like the example you just gave, get a permit passed and you automatically extend it 90 days. I get that. Why then do we, when we're talking about essentially a project that hasn't had that progress, why do we switch to the word deemed invalid rather than saying, for example, automatically invalid or automatically invalidated? Why the difference in the wording? Is there an extra step when that 180 days comes that somebody has to say it's now an invalid permit, or is it in fact automatically invalidated?
So deemed invalid gives a little bit of vagueness, which would allow for other aspects. There's a whole lot that goes into a development, as you all know. Any project has a lot of variables. And so there could be instances where it is appropriate that they haven't made that 180-day positive progress through a past inspection, but that was because there was, I'm not going to say a bad thing. So something wonderful happened. We all had to take a break to celebrate in 2026 our country. And so because of that time period and all the celebrations that were paid for by the state of Missouri, we could not work on that project because you couldn't utilize the roads because the roads were closed for those parades. So in that instance, it gives a little bit of leeway for understanding that.
And that's good. I appreciate that. I guess I'm kind of asking just flip that to a slightly negative perspective where there wasn't a good reason, right? No apparent good reason. is it automatically terminated, or does staff have to take action?
Are you talking about the permit or the application?
The permit. We're talking about the permit being deemed invalid. So I get the deemed allows us to give some grace if we see reason to, but if there is no reason to, is it automatically invalid, or does staff still have to act to invalidate it?
It would always require an act by staff based on, unfortunately, everything is dictated by the software, right? So there has to be an automatic aspect. Then with that notification, and this is why you had the appeal issue, that person then can appeal that determination and make an argument regarding justifiable cause. So it is what was the impetus for us looking into the Board of Appeals. In any of those determinations, you would then have an appealable option, which is mandated for due process.
So would it be a fair assumption then, under the case where there wasn't extenuating circumstances, the permit is now more than 100, let's say 200 days, just to use a number, old, if staff hasn't actually canceled that permit, is it still valid?
Well, I'm not going to give you an answer
Well,
to
this
that.
is the, I'm
Yes.
asking because of the language.
Yes.
The language, doesn't say automatic,
So-
it says deemed,
Yeah,
and that's
so it would be deemed, we would send the notification. The notification could be the basis of the appeal. There are things that go on in developments that they're not sharing with us because you don't have that requirement. And that's part of the permitting. I give you an idea and a plan, and you tell me what inspections are going on, and that's how it works. So we have to have avenues for reconsideration, and in that reconsideration, it may be the first time we're hearing of what that reason was.
Okay,
I will say, Supervisor Teed and I did not labor over that choice of language. That choice of language was utilized from Republic. So we felt a little assurance in that choice of language because it was utilized elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you. That answers my question.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Alex?
Good evening, Board, Mayor, City Administrator. I have the opportunity to chair the Proactive Government Committee at the Chamber, and Citizen Serve has been a point of discussion, as you guys have remembered. My question is, could you just elaborate? I'm loosely familiar, because you spoke about it in that committee, the paralleled efforts that are going alongside of cleaning up the ordinance, mainly regarding Citizen Serve. There's a log jam that we've talked about. There's a knowledge gap between the end user and city staff. I myself have gone through the process a handful of times, and there's still a little bit of a knowledge gap there. So could you just elaborate for the contractor community on kind of what that effort's going to be alongside of updating the ordinance when you're talking about things that have sit unactioned, whether it be by a unknowing contractor or a gap at City Hall?
Absolutely, thank you, Alex. Yeah, we've gone, are still going through actually, I don't know if flushing is the right word. Well, maybe it is. A flushing of the Citizen Serve process and making sure that we understand from the end user's perspective what are the challenges. Just by its very nature of being an online system, that can pose an initial challenge for users. So we've got stopgap measures and helpful measures here across the hall to help walk people through with an on-site station to where we can have one of our staff sit with them and go through it. But on the internal mechanics and the systemic challenges that we've got with the software, we've got a specialist representative from the company, from Citizen Serve, who's been on site recently for many hours, spending time with our planning department and going through with the tacticians on our end, and then with a list of complaints from the user end to try and mitigate those challenges. So it's an ongoing thing, Alex. It's a wildly complicated, big system that we inherited coming in. So we're married right now through a contract, and so we're going through counseling right now with Citizen Serve to try and make this marriage work. And so, but we're very aware of the challenges that we've had. These particular changes that we're talking about really aren't Citizen Serve focused. It's just more about policy, right? And helping us manage our workload, and then what's a fair expectation, and when it comes to what codes you're going to be judged by, what fees you're going to pay, et cetera, to try and level the playing field. So thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, Board. My name's Andrew Cushman, business address 1015 State Highway 248, Branson, Mo 65616. First off, I appreciate the opportunity to address you guys directly on this matter. I think the Plan Department's done a really good job in trying to update processes and, communicate with us, the applicants. I've had my own issues with Citizen Serve, and they've helped me walk through a few things. Norm, sitting back there, has helped me, as well as Amanda. I know she's not here tonight, but I appreciate the effort that they've made to try to make it as easy as possible. But I did want to talk a little bit more about this specific code change. I do like that the new permits issued are going to have a lifespan of a year before they have to have any sort of inspection or extension. One thing I did have a question on was starting on, I guess, point number 2 for permits, line 76. It's talking about, invalidating permits based upon no progress and stuff of that nature. One word that I really had some consternation with was continuous and substantial progress. I mean, what does that mean to you guys? Because to me, continuous means no rain days, no down days. So I don't like ambiguity. Can't get it out right now.
Ambiguity.
There we go. In code, because I know that, it's one thing for a board like you guys to pass an ordinance and a code change, and it's another thing for at some point you guys are going to be replaced by the future board, and they might have a different interpretation of what this code means. So I think that might, we might define that or even strike that language from this, at least continuous. I understand what substantial progress means because it defines it right below that, which I think is fair. One of the other things I had a question for, and I guess.
Jane, before you move on, Holly, do you have any comments on that?
Where are you saying it says continuous and substantial progress?
Line
77.
Line 77.
Second word. To me, that's an and, this, not this or that.
It's not on the version I have. I apologize. I'm going to have to do this without glasses.
Holly, I can speak to that a little bit, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I think that any changes in the wording here, we would want to make sure that we went back to the drawing board and legal before we just did that. So the words here are crafted very specifically. So
Yeah,
think
I agree with that. So, Solon, based on that, would you just suggest we postpone this to the next meeting?
If we're not okay with the language as existing, I would suggest that we do that.
Kathy?
So I'm just going to give an example from my own experience as a builder for a lot of years, which is probably everybody here remembers the crash of '08 and how devastating that was. And so what we were seeing in our state at the time was that there was a lot of developments that started and put infrastructure in the ground, laid the sewer pipe, et cetera, and then walked away. Either they, just gave up on the project, or they went, we're not going to build out any further and be further invested because the economy is in a bad condition right now. And what those builders and developers had to do was 3 years later go back and reapply for all new permits again. That clearly there was no progress that was done. There was weeds growing in the wetlands and everything else. So that's an extreme example. But really what we're looking for is I think it almost has to be a little bit vague in that because projects are so different, it's difficult to be able to delineate exactly what progress would be considered substantial. We just want to see that there's activity there. And in our experience, there's permit holders in the city that just haven't shown up at the property for months and months. And so it's at that point, you're like, well, what's happening here, right? Is this permit still active or not? So I think that's really what we were going for here and what other cities have gone for, because this is who we copied this from, is just that we want to make sure the project's still moving. And if it's been abandoned or looks abandoned, then we've got these other measures in place.
I understand that. I just think continuous needs to be struck. That's very vague.
Well, and I think, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I also hear what, I think it's obvious, I think it'd be obvious to the city that if it's been sitting there for a month or 3 days past that something happened, you didn't get a piece of equipment, or it was raining, it was muddy. You know what I mean? Can you just trust us? No, I'm just kidding. But I hear what you're saying.
Tried that a few times.
I know. No, I know. I hear what you're saying, but I also have faith in this woman and the staff that they're not going to see that thing sit still for 4 days and come in and say you're in some kind of violation, or 2 weeks.
I understand that, Clay, and I know you know how business works around here. I just feel like that specific word makes it very unclear from the next word, which is very clear, with a whole nother sentence that delineates what that means. There's no meaning to continuous other than my understanding, and whoever is understanding it might be the planning director, because it looks to me like that's the person that gets to decide, hey, looks like we're shutting this down, or hey, you've had progress, you know, so.
So, and you're saying it could be, you tick off that particular guy one day and you sit there for 4 days, he goes, well, is that what your fear is? That
I'm just saying that's an undefined word. Substantial progress is very well defined, in my opinion. In the next sentence, you're passing, some inspection, and that's someone coming on site to pass that inspection, and that's how you get substantial progress. But how that's worded is continuous and substantial. That's like saying you have to sing and dance.
I do it all, my friend.
I know. Unfortunately, we're not all you, Clay, so.
So what is
Solon, would you want to weigh in? Because I don't know if we need to necessarily hold up the whole thing to evaluate the word continuous. We could, because this is first read, right? So we've got a second read opportunity coming up here. So I think what I would recommend is, if the board's okay with the rest of all of this, which is a huge body of work, that you pass it tonight, and then our legal team can convene. And if we feel you guys want to have a more defined word or definition of continuous, or strike continuous, you can give us the next week or so to kind of hash that out, and we can bring it back at final read.
And if I may, the reason that combination of continuous and substantial progress is, in and of itself, I could have substantial progress in the first 180 days, right? So I've done it for a year, I made a whole bunch of progress. Now I'm at that stage in the example you gave where I'm looking like maybe I can't get funding, or I don't like the interest rates, which have nothing to do with the permit and the substantial progress continuing into the next phase, each extension. So I do think you need the unification of the continuous and substantial, because it needs to continue towards the idea of a permit is not, I have a pie in the sky idea. I have plans, I have a determination of a project that I am going to complete, and it is getting to that finish line.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So instead of defining continuous, could you define what continuous is not? In other words, could we say it will be deemed to not be continuous if dormant for 60 days or something like that?
So in statutory determination, for construction, if it is not defined within the ordinance in this situation, you would utilize Webster Dictionary's definition of continuous in the understanding and legislative intent. And that's why we have that whereas language in there, is that you want definition as a body within works within your city that progress and complete. It is never to the benefit of anyone involved in a project to have it sit for a year, 2 years without continuous substantial progress. There's my 2 cents.
You had more.
I do have more. There's a lot more. So the next one would be, what's this lady's name? I don't know.
Holly.
Holly, could you tell me what the current code is for inspections as is today, before passing of any new language?
Do you have like concerns about it versus a question answer thing? If
I'm
you just
asking,
want to.
I don't know what the specific language is today. I assume that they probably have an idea. I have an understanding of it, but I wondered what the actual language said. That's what I was asking.
Kathy, I think the proper thing would be to just provide comment, Andrew, and then they can take the comment for what it's worth. But I don't think that we're going to engage in a question and answer with legal counsel and the Board of Aldermen.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my concern is, it's the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. My understanding is the code reads today, pass or fail, there's no limit on extensions, automatic anyway, at the moment with an inspection. So I guess I'm asking, why are we changing that?
And again, I think that would be a rhetorical question, because we would just appreciate your comment. We're not going to exchange back and forth on questions, if that makes sense.
That's the 2 main things, yeah. It's just, so, no answer to that?
You're
Why
welcome
changing
to,
the
I think,
code?
I think you're welcome to give your comment, Andrew, and everyone in here is appreciative of all the diverse perspectives, and I think the board can take that into consideration, whatever is your concern is.
I stated it seems like the code's vastly different than what you're proposing, and I'm just trying to figure out why we're changing the code if it seems to work, because this change effectively would actually put more work on the city staff's back, because after one automatic extension, one automatic extension with an inspection, you have to apply for a permit extension, which is not so quick with Citizen Serve, as you guys know, you're married to it, and there's positives and negatives with it. To get an extension, you have to email city staff, then they have to open Citizen Serve back up. And then if I'm not the person that was the original applicant, even if I'm a business owner or a landowner, I have to then become the applicant and submit some files. And those folks that originally did the submissions on our behalf or whoever's behalf might not be involved anymore. So it's just it seems like this is a much more direct and, a process that seems to be working, because people are coming out doing inspections, and I don't know, you go from 90 days and do an inspection to 180, so less time on site. I don't know. Doesn't.
Good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the audience? Hearing none, the board ready to vote? Glenn?
So I do kind of get the point here about the words continuous and substantial from the comments that were made. But the second comment, I'm not sure. I'm looking at this, the way it's proposed, and correct me, Holly, if I'm wrong, if in that 180-day period, forget the word continuous for now, because that'll just get us balled up, but in that 180-day period, if they have an inspection in that 180-day period, let's say it's right towards the end, does paragraph 3 say that without touching Citizen Serve, you get an automatic 90-day extension? Is that right?
Correct.
Is that an improvement from our current condition today? Would they have to apply for that?
Correct.
Okay. So that part we've actually improved, right? It's easier for the contractor.
Yeah, because it recognizes that, unlike a marathon, when you're at the finish line, everything is scrambling, everything is coming together. You have the most contractors involved on this situation. So why should you step back? You're progressing, you're continuing, and you're passing permits, stop and look and go, oh, I need an extra 45 days. We wanted that automatic because that gave you that little bit of gap.
And that's a one-time automatic, right?
Yes.
And then after that, let's just say they get that automatic 90 and for whatever reason they need more time. Is that where paragraph 4 comes in then? And the planning director can say, oh, I can see what's going on here. I'll grant you more time. I'll grant you another 100-day, 80-day extension?
Yes, with justifiable cause in writing.
Yeah, so that would be more like a citizen serve interaction at that point for the next 180-day renewal.
Correct.
So I just, in terms of the legal issue of the word continuous, since our attorney brought that up, that maybe we shouldn't amend the ordinance, what's the proposal in terms of considering this comment about the word continuous, if we're not going to amend the motion or amend the ordinance now? I feel like we should be able to amend the ordinance, and I appreciate the fact that our legal counsel has worked on this, but I think it is the privilege of the alderman to amend it. Would it work for us to amend it and then legal come back before our next reading to say, okay, now that we've looked at this, here's what we propose instead of your amendment? Or do you want it that we approve it as it is, and then you're going to work on what in between?
The same thing we would be working on were you to do it in the opposite order, right?
So
So my suggestion is, because those two words could have very significant legal meaning, it's my recommendation that you leave it as is tonight, with my commitment that with our legal team, we will go back and evaluate this and report back to you guys before the final read. So if you want to make an amendment, then you can pull it down from the consent agenda and amend it at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
And is there another word in there to replace continuous that, intent or,
Without stop.
you know what I mean? Substantial intent or intent,
But
whatever.
I'm wondering
That's the
now-
Webster's dictionary.
But I'm wondering if part of the concern is, if the feeling is more contiguous versus continuous, and then we're getting into legal definitions, because when I read, and I agree, it's up to interpretation, but I'll follow legal's advice, but I don't read that as continuous, meaning every single day. Right? It's more of a process, but.
Well, and
Yeah,
I was going to say that, the idea seems to be predicated on the idea that there's not human communication in all of this, which there is, and that continuous and substantial progress could simply be communication, and it's just updating and making sure that, hey, if you did have that lag in time where no progress is being made, that city staff and is made aware that, hey, we're waiting on this.
Yeah.
That nullifies our continuous progress. So, it's simply being predicated on the idea that it's just work product that's happening, but really it's overall project, which in turn, factors in human communication between the developer or the contractor and our city staff, which I think makes this, fair and valid.
I'd like to
Mayor-
follow Kathy's.
That was me, Mayor, over here. If I may just say one last comment, kind of piggybacking off of that. While we would turn to Webster's dictionary, we would also first turn to case law. And there may be case law in certain circumstances that do define the word continuous in the realm of permits and applications. And so that may actually include contact with a city in certain cases where a judge was like, well, I think it includes the contact. So again, we wouldn't want to change something like this that's been tested and tried without going through the
Yeah.
analytical process.
So based on that, I'm going to follow Kathy's suggestion, recommend that we approve this on the first reading, and we will learn more at the next meeting. If we're going to make a change, we'll pull it down. Glenn?
Change a topic on this bill if I can. I just wanted to ask the reason I noticed that in the amended part of the ordinance, I think this is new, correct me if I'm wrong, that now the owner or their representative has to sign all the documents. I don't think we had that requirement before. On Citizen Serve, you'd go in, the documents might have to be stamped by a PE or architect, but the application on Citizen Serve was the quote-unquote signature. This sounds like this is a new requirement, or am I wrong? Do you need a reference?
Yes, please.
I think it's
The
starting in
properly-
line 50 up there.
So it properly authorized application documents.
Documents. So does that mean that, my MEP documents have to all be signed and
So
all
if
the
you,
drawings have to be signed and,
if you go to that second sentence, all application documents shall be signed by the property owner or an appropriately authorized designee or representative before they are valid. It is not like an engineer's stamping where you stamp and sign on
Right.
every page, but there are many documents that are submitted, and so sometimes you'll have an initial plan, and we'll look at it, and we'll say, hey, I don't think that belongs to this project, and they go, whoops, okay, and I get another one. So we do have multiple documents that get submitted, and so it ensures that those documents, those which do require signatures, are signed by the appropriate party. It is not requiring that every page be signed.
but this is new, is my question.
Yes, this language?
Yes, the requirement for the owner or their designee to sign all the documents is new.
No. It is stated in a different way than it is within each code. The code requires application by the owner or the appropriate authorized representative in the international code, right? See, I learned from him. I pay attention. In the School of Supervisor Teed.
So I guess, we're writing it new into our ordinance, and we're not striking out, in this case, something from the ICC language, right? So this is new.
You are striking it from the ICC language in, if you go through starting on line, maybe line 96 or so, where we go through each of those codes regarding time limitation and expiration regarding applications. It is parallel to some existing language. I believe they are all like the one before, so 105.3.1, and I'd have to double check that, but I believe those all require applications to be properly submitted and properly signed within each of the international codes.
Yeah,
We are, again, just codifying that in one place where it's easy to determine that requirement.
I see, for example, on line 122, where we're striking out 105.3.2, which is time limits of applications. Without having that section in front of me, I can't speak to whether that's the requirement to sign documents as part of the application process. But Holly, my concern here is that, we are going through red tape things, and I'm looking for the valid reason to make somebody have to go sign all their documents when it's submitted as a package of documents under Citizen Serve. What's the basis other than we're going to bounce an application because you failed to sign all the documents?
It's signing the documents to which a signature is required. So your application in and of itself has multiple pages, and then at the end you sign it. It's a continuous feed on Citizen Serve because you go from question to question to question. If I printed it out, it would look like multiple pages, but at the very bottom of the application, there's verification that I have the authority, this is my property, whatever, and then I sign. So I have signed all of that document, which may consist of multiple pages because you've had to add in additional information.
Okay, that's good clarification. So we're not saying that when I submit my MEP package as part of my overall application, which is one of many documents, I don't have to sign that as the owner, nor do I have to sign the site plan as the owner, nor do I have to sign the elevation plans as the owner. I just need to sign on Citizen Serve. Is that correct?
Correct, with whatever process. I don't want to hold it to Citizen Serve, because if there was a divorce at some point in the future, it's not Citizen Serve, but
I'm just
it's
talking
the
about our current
mechanism,
system.
And it requires that all application documents shall be signed, but it's not saying every page. It's saying the documents themselves. There are multiple aspects that may need signatures other than just that initial application. It is not making a requirement that every piece of paper have a signature, as
Okay.
required by an engineer's stamp.
Yeah, because it does kind of sound like that when you read it. But if you're interpreting it differently, I guess I'll have to accept that. It sounds to me, though, like it's saying that the documents all have to be signed.
We could go to the Board of Appeals.
Glenn, if we stayed on the plan and approved it, then before the next meeting, it would give you an opportunity to look up what these are.
I've looked it up already, and I specifically spent time on Citizen Serve ahead of this meeting, emulating submissions so that I'd understand the issue. And I'm just asking now for clarification, because I can see on Citizen Serve, which is our current process, I can clearly see on Citizen Serve when I submit for a building permit, what I've got to submit. I mean, there's a list of documents there that are recommended. I can see all the questions I've got to answer. And down before you actually hit submit, I can see where I need, as the applicant, to quote unquote sign the application. I get all that, right? And we've had that process in place before this ordinance. And we didn't have this language in place before this. So I'm trying to discern, does this language drive something other than what we're doing today?
It does not. It is a codification of the process that we utilize currently.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So only because I'm in the middle of a permit process right now. So like on Friday, my architect sends me this property owner's authorization form, right? Saying that I agree to let this person speak on my behalf or blah, blah, blah. So am I done at that point, me, and now they sign on all of my papers? Is that what we're getting at? Okay.
That's the authorized person.
Yes, okay.
That's a designee.
I mean, is this kind of what Glenn's talking about at that point? Sort of.
Yes, so some people are the whole shebang, and some have multiple people, and they're just authorizing it. So it ensures that the appropriate people must sign. We already require that procedurally. It is not codified.
And Holly, if I can, and Norm could probably speak to this more, but I think in Citizen Serve, the system itself has some limitations on who acknowledges the actual application or permit. And so it's typically one person at a time, is that correct? And so what happens is sometimes when an initial developer wants to start the process, they'll be the applicant, and then they'll go, I need my architect to finish this up for me because either they don't have time or they're the proper person. And so they'll switch the person that's authorized to submit documents to that, since there's only one person able to do so, to another person. It would provide great organization for the city to be able to understand who is submitting these things along the road. And so there's a couple of other reasons I think that would be helpful. I mean, there's no reason why, I mean, a signature is not that hard to put on a document too, ensuring that they actually are the ones that submitted it to Citizen Serve.
And the reason I didn't answer that in regards to Citizen Service, there are some systems that do require acknowledgement before you go on to the next. And so it depends on the system and how that system is set up. So when there are issues that become litigated, and then the case law comes down, we say, oh, and you make them initial this particular aspect. So then that would be an area that pursuant to this language, you would have to sign.
Other than Glenn, does anybody else have any questions? Just kidding, Glenn. Any other questions on the board? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. We're at the report section of the meeting. Alderman Lucas, any words of wisdom you'd like to share? Clay?
He didn't want to talk to you, Mayor.
See that?
I have one question for Michael Woods. Does he need to come to the microphone?
Sure.
Well, I mean, if I want to answer. Okay. Sorry, Michael. Oh, he's going the long route.
Come back, Michael, come back.
It's okay, buddy. It's just a. Oh, there you go. Okay. I was just curious. I noticed the signs we put up to help at the crosswalks are gone, and I just wondered what happened.
Yeah, so we took those down for snow plowing operations and safety.
They'll come back up.
Yeah, they'll be back up, but we have one more chance of the bad word, snow or ice.
I kind of figured that, but I just thought I'll know if I ask the question. Thank you.
Before you sit down, thank you and your team very much.
Yes.
Super proud of the team, so. I appreciate that very much, and appreciate the storm that was there, and all the guys and women that were worked super hard to make it safe, so we fared through. Thank you.
Those, in addition to the snow levels, that extreme temperature made it so challenging, and I thought you guys did great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I saw a few negative comments out there on Branson Buzz. But this was a different kind of deal. This wasn't 3 inches of fluffy snow. This was extreme cold and a lot that fell quickly. So it wasn't as easy, but y'all did a great job.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Anything else, Clay? No, sir. Marshall? Ralph?
So I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the month of February. I don't normally write down comments, but this is a little bit different tonight. There's many reasons to recognize February: National Freedom Day, Groundhog Day, Valentine's Day, National Pizza Day, President's Day, Black History Month, and the list goes on. Today, I would like us to recall nearly 10 years ago. In fact, it was February 22nd, when a Branson 6-year-old kindergartner named Jasmine Miller was strangled to death at the former Windsor Inn and Extended Stay Motel. As we reflect on this senseless tragedy nearly 10 years ago, I find strength and hope in the direction our city is headed and the work we have done as a board to ensure these senseless tragedies are few and far between in our city. The past few years have shown what political courage, bravery, and a passionate commitment to serving can accomplish in our community and the precious lives of our young residents. Our police department has reached full staffing. They've been invested in, that new police department, and now proactively engage in our city streets to address crime, protect the innocent, and most importantly, ensure those who commit crimes meet justice. This proactive stance the city of Branson has taken is a show of force necessary to let criminals know that you are not welcome here. Our Lodge and Safety Initiative tackled head-on the prevailing issue of a number of historical, unlicensed, and unsafe lodging and extended stay establishments. We didn't back down. Instead, we put a plan in place and saw it through to success by taking bold steps as necessary to ensure any establishment operating in the city is fully licensed and meets the mandatory life safety, and health standards. As we reflect on the 10-year anniversary of Jasmine Miller's murder, Jasmine Miller, who would have been 16 years old this year, I want you to know you are not forgotten. I'm encouraged by this board's demonstrated actions to stand in the fire and always do what's best for our community, especially the most vulnerable of our community. Tonight, we send our thoughts, prayers, and remembrance for the whole community to Jasmine and her loved ones.
Thank you, Ralph. Glenn?
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. First of all, it's really nice to see Ira and Marie back in the house. So now I feel like we have real Board of Aldermen meetings, so we can carry on. Glad to have you here. I too attended along with some of the other staff and aldermen the fire department's award evening, and can't help but have that in the forefront of your mind, and then think about the explosion that just happened with 2 firefighters. They just go through their awards ceremony, and of course, just like the police department, many of those awards involve bravery and training and preparation and skills and so on. And then just a few days later, we learn of 2 of our firefighters being injured on the job. So I just want to extend prayers for their physical and mental healing as they go through this process, and also, of course, to the civilian that was injured in that terrible explosion. Last week, I attended the Legislative Affairs meeting and just thought I'd share a couple of quick things from there. First, I was really shocked. I didn't realize this. Our Assembly has over 1,400 bills in front of them to consider in this session. Just a shocking number. They thought it might actually get up to 2,000 by the time the deadline hits this week. And that doesn't include resolutions and constitutional amendments. And there's a couple hundred more of those. And those guys got to cruise through all of that in the next 2 months or so. Just amazing the amount of work that these guys have. So they're in their last few days to file bills. But the one that I thought might be interesting for us as a city, it was actually an ask in that meeting, it was about 2 years ago that a state statute, 71.990, was enacted. And it's entitled Home-Based Businesses, Use of Residential Dwelling, and Limitations on Restrictions by Political Subdivisions, which is us. So this ordinance is in effect, and one of the things, it's a rather long ordinance, I'm not going to read it, but one of the things that kind of struck me was it specifically prohibits a city like us from requiring a business permit for a home-based business. Okay, so the reason I bring this up is because there's currently a bill on the floor to repeal this entire statute. And the question is, do any cities have interest in weighing in on this, either with examples of issues or concerns or so on? So I'm not sure if we want to handle that as something that the aldermen would take action on, or if city staff would like to tackle that one through our lobbyists. But it just struck me as there was something that somewhere in there is probably of interest to the city of Branson, one way or the other. Since it does restrict what we can do. By the way, it doesn't stop us from life safety inspections and things like that, but we cannot ask them for a business permit for any home-based business. So that's got implications for us, I would think, and maybe we've got some things to say about that. The person that's sponsoring that bill is Bill Faulkner from St. Joseph, if we have any interest. That's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Glenn. Kathy?
Thank you, Alderman, on alerting us on the bill. We'd already been alerted on that from our lobbyist, Chris Ropey from Barget and Associates, and we've provided appropriate comments on how detrimental that would be to the city. So we're on it, so thank you for that.
But remember, the bill that's on the floor is to repeal this thing that's detrimental to the city. So, yeah, just so we get our perspective.
No, I'm with you, so thank you. The only other thing I want to update you all on is a reminder of the campgrounds ribbon cutting this week, Friday at 1 p.m. It's going to be beautiful weather, so we're inviting the public to come out, and I'm hopeful our elected officials will be able to join us as well. So 1 p.m. at the campground. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll take that off my list. I attended the Missouri Association of Manufacturers. They're having their convention in Branson. Very impressive. The entire exhibit space is full of the manufacturing. And so Leanne and I attended their coolest 16 items they had. And they're looking at taking that from the Ozarks region to the full state. I would like to thank or congratulate Hillary. Hillary, what did you do to deserve congratulations? You don't know?
Can I just pick one, or?
That is so funny. Here, I'll give you a hint. Hillary has received her certificate from the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. That certificate involves many, many hours of professional training and education, and I thought we would all say congrats to you. Yeah, she loves the attention. I should ask her to come up and give us
We'll do autographs later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Speech. With that, I am done. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion adjourned. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Chief Martin.